Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be talking about a family game by the name of 5x5 Zoo. This is a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 45 minutes, and it's put out in Japan. There's only a Japanese version of it, although there are English rules available on Board Game Geek for the game. Put out by Okazu brand, and the game is designed by Hisashi Hayashi, which is one of the, most noted Japanese designers of recent years. So this is a game that's sort of a sequel or a spiritual successor to 5x5 City, which was a tile drafting and tile laying game that came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And in this one, players are going to be similarly drafting tiles in order to complete a zoo. It's a slight step up in complexity, whereas that game took, it said on the box, maybe 30 minutes. This one takes about 45 minutes if you're playing with 4 players, maybe slightly less with only 2 players. I haven't yet played the solo game, I should note. And it is has a little bit more thought involved in the turn structure. It's a slight step up in complexity to its successor. I'll take a few minutes to show you how the game plays and come back and let you know what I think about it. I have here a setup of a 2-player game of 5x5 Zoo, and as you can see, there's quite a lot going on here, but the game is relatively simple. It's played over 3 rounds, and in those rounds, players are going to be drafting tiles from this section here, maybe getting bonuses from this section here, and adding them to their player board, which is down here. And what they're trying to do is trying to create paths for customer cubes that they're going to be acquiring over the course of the game to trace a route through their zoo. And you can see at the start of the game there are going to be 3 gate cards that come up, and they tell you during the course of the game, after players have drafted 5 tiles each during the main part of the round, there's going to be a scoring phase where customers are going to come into the park from the west, then the south, then the north in rounds 1, 2, and 3 respectively. So at the start of the game, each player is going to get 2 tokens, which they'll have to place into these red bordered markers on their player board, so each player is going to get 2 of those at random. These animal tokens are basically in 6 different types. They correspond with the colors of the cubes that you see over here. One weird thing is that the yellow and orange cubes don't quite match up, but I think it's easy enough to understand once somebody points out to you that those are supposed to go together. And the 6th type are basically these park tiles, which are the purple tiles, and those could hold a cube of any color. So also at the start of the game, each player is going to get 3 of these cards, basically at the end of each round. If they have the tiles that are depicted on any of these cards, they could turn those in for the victory points that are shown on the bottom. The only catch is that you cannot use the same tile to complete multiple cards during the same round. So these are just player goals, and those are going to be kept open. So on a player's turn, the first thing that happens at the start of the round is each player in round 1 is going to get 1 random cube. So this player would get a green, and this player 2 would get a red, and those would just basically be put off to the side, or the player, if they wanted to, could put it on their board but not commit it till the end of the round. But essentially you'll be building up a stockpile of these cubes over the course of the round. Then what players are going to do in turn order, and there's a star player card, is that they're going to draft 1 tile from here, and depending on what row they take the tile from, they will get a cube and then possibly a bonus. So this player board here has a lot of Japanese text on it, but it's really easy to follow once you actually understand the rules of the game. Nothing on here is necessary to be able to read. In a 2-player game, you're going to put 2 tiles in each of these bottom rows here and 2 tiles at the top. In a multiplayer game, so a 3 or 4-player game, you would put 3 tiles in every row except for the top row, which only ever will get 2 tiles. So whenever you draft one of these tiles, you'll, like I said, also get a cube, and these the designated cubes are randomized for 5 of the 6 rows. These white cubes are essentially a wild cube that could go onto any tile. So as soon as you take a tile, you have to basically draft it and put it somewhere in your park. So maybe this player would, since we know that guests are going to be coming in the west gate, you'll need to have that space filled. So it might, and they would probably look at what cards that they have and maybe draft something that would match that, or try to get a cube that matches an animal that they will have to be passing through. So maybe just for the sake of argument, they might take this tile here and place it here. And you could place it anywhere on your board. Once you place it, though, it is committed, and you can't move it along anywhere. It's not necessary to place adjacent to your previously placed tiles or anything like that. So for taking this tile from here, you can see the player would also get a green cube, and they just add that to their supply. And then they would either get one of these two bonuses. They could take a meeple of any color, which is basically a cube that carries over from round to round. Any cubes that you have to be used during a scoring round, or else they go away. So this player might take a blue meeple since they have a blue animal that hopefully will make it into their path. The other options are, and I'll go from top to bottom, the first row, you're always going to get a tile here, essentially, and then you'll get the cube and the bonus. The first row doesn't have a bonus, but you get a white cube, so a wild cube, so that's handy. The second row, you get either a crown, which is a popularity marker. You just simply put that on an animal tile. Each one could hold one. And if ever you pass through it with your cubes at the end of the round, it'll be worth an extra point. Here, you get one of these cards. So there's going to be number of players plus one cards put out at the start of the round, and you get to just draft one of these. So this one's 3 points at the end of the game. This one's instantly get a popularity marker and draw this card and take the cube that's shown. And this one is at the end of the game. You would get a point for each canary you have, or parrot, I suppose, on your player board. So they're just simple things like that. Next row, you simply draw two of these, and you get two random cubes. And then here, this one is basically you get a meeple, which is a permanent cube that will carry over from round to round. It won't be discarded. The final row down here, it doesn't have any bonus, but the tiles are basically 2x1s or 1x2s. So you can see we have some that are horizontal and some that are vertical. Something that I'll point out is that some of these tiles do have victory points on them. If you take these tiles, it's generally because they are going to have walls on them. You can see there's a wall on this side or a wall on that side. These points will be scored at the end of the game, but the walls are essentially obstacles for your people. So the other option that you could do when you take from any of these 4 rows is to take a door, which if you place, let me just show you an example. For example, if you put this here and maybe this here, and you wanted to use cubes to travel across there, you would need to put a door on that wall to get through it. You also get a point for every time that you pass through a door, so that's another benefit of taking those, but it is generally pretty costly to take one of those doors. So, like I said, each player is going to be drafting 5 of these at the end of the round. They'll simply be 2 tiles, regardless of the player count, in this array. And then players are going to go into the scoring round. So let me just take a moment and set up something that would look like a scoring. So maybe we would have something like this, and maybe something like that. And maybe they took one from up here. And let's say they took a yellow cube. Alright, so the way the scoring round works is each player could pretty much do this simultaneously, or you could just take turns doing it. Is each player is going to be able to allocate their meeples and cubes onto the tiles, tracing a single route without doubling back upon itself from the designated gate. So in this case, the west gate. So here, for example, this green tile will require a green cube. They could go there. Then the next one would be here. They would have to use their white cube because they don't have another green cube. Then maybe they would use their black and their blue. They could have gone with the yellow here, but that would have been a dead end since they didn't have a third green cube. That would be a particularly poor scoring example, and like I said, you'll generally have more tiles, and these tiles are going to carry over from round to round. So the next round, they're going to be coming from the south, so these tiles will already be in place. So you would just simply need to place this, and then players would be able to trace a route into the already existing tiles from the first round. So scoring tends to go up from round to round. But in any case, the way this is scored is you're just going to get, oh, and actually, to go through there and to go through there would require doors. So we'll just, for the sake of explanation, say that they got those doors, and maybe they also got a star animal tile, and maybe they put it on that one. So the way this would score would be this would be 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 points for 4 visitors in there, and then they would get an additional point for this, so 5, and then an additional point for each door that a visitor went through, the chain of visitors went through, so 6, 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4 for the visitors, 5 for the popularity markers, 6, 7 for the doorways. So that's pretty much how the game is going to score. At the end of the round, then, you are going to leave your popularity markers and doors, and you're going to take off your meeple that's going to carry over from round to round, but any cubes, whether you use them or not, are simply going to get returned back to the supply. So then you know that in the next round the visitors are going to be coming up from the south, so you should be planning accordingly in round 1 for that. So this player tried to build southward even though they knew they were coming in the west. So pretty simple in that regard. And this would refill. These tiles would get randomized. Cards here would get refreshed. Each player would get an additional... Oh, first of all, during the scoring phase, they'd have an opportunity to turn this in. So, for example, if this player had one more canary, they would be able to turn this in for 4 points. But they don't, so they would just carry it over till the next round and hopefully be able to score it then. But each player then will get one additional card like this. And also, each player in round 2 will get 2 cubes at the start of the round. So they'll draw 2 of these cards and get those depicted cubes on it. In round 3, they'll get 3 cards from that, and they'll get 1 additional card for here. So that's pretty much it. The game is basically going to last 3 rounds, and each round you're going to do a scoring through the depicted gate. And then there's some finals scoring. So at the end of the game, you'll also score the points that are shown on any difficult animals, essentially the animals that had walls on them. And then you'll also get there's some endgame cards. These are only in Japanese, but there is an English rules translation posted on Board Game Geek that explains what these all do. So here, for example, this player would get a point for each wall in their largest connected chain of walls. You'd look at each row and column, and if there are 4 or 5 colors in a row or column, you'll score. And you look at how many rows and columns that qualifies for. So if you had like 8 total rows and columns that qualify for that, you get 18 points. And this one, at the end of the game, you look at how many sets of your 5 different colors of cubes you have on your board, and you score points for that. So those are just some examples. There's more of these included with the game. There's also included in each game a variant card, which will give you some additional rules that give you some bonuses. This one, again, these are in Japanese, but the rule book explains them. This one says that if you place a tile that has 2 walls on it, you immediately get a population marker and place it on any animal tile. So that is pretty much, in a nutshell, what you're going to do. At the end of the game, you just do your normal scoring and then score these and your animal tiles, and then whoever has the most points is the winner of 5x5 Zoo. Alright, so that is 5x5 Zoo, and as you can see, it's an overwhelmingly cute game. You know, the animal tiles, the theme, it all really comes through. It just seems like it has really nice, clear graphic design, something that a lot of the Kazu brand games do have. Unfortunately, it is only printed right now in Japanese, but I don't think that this small amount of Japanese text that's on it would be enough to deter most gamers from seeking out a copy. 5x5 City is really a lovely family game, and this one is pretty good as well. It's a shame that these are not yet picked up for Western release, because they are worthy of that. I will say that generally speaking, I probably do prefer the simplicity of 5x5 City to this one based on my initial plays. This one is perfectly fine. I don't think it's too complex by any means, but the added complexity of it does make it more of a middleweight game or a full experience game. You know, it's a 45-minute game versus a filler game like 5x5 City is. 5x5 City almost felt like a roll and write because you were simply drafting tiles and placing them onto your grid and then scoring your grid at the end of the game, whereas this one feels more like a strategy game. It's more akin to something like or a normal board game. It's more akin to something maybe like Zularetto or something, where you have long-term planning in a way that it felt maybe not as pronounced in 5x5 City. There's certainly goals that want you to specialize, but in this game, you're going to have 3 scoring rounds over the course of the game, so you're going to be thinking, and you have more things that you're juggling. Having to get the cube, not just having to get the cubes, but having to get the tiles to place on your given cubes gives you just more of a cognitive load in this game. Now that makes it sound like it's a heavy game, but it's by no means that. It's just a more complex game than its predecessor. So if you haven't played its predecessor, I think that generally speaking, the comparisons aren't particularly useful because this isn't just a version of 5x5 City with different scoring conventions and different tiles. It's a pretty different game entirely. It's not really a spin-off or a sequel so much as just a thematic or branding successor. So about the game, I do think that it is enjoyable. It's just like any. I've said this before, I believe in videos, but there's been a lot of roll and writes over the last few years, and there's something to be said for having a game where you're actually drafting tiles and placing them on your board instead of just drawing on a piece of paper. That's one of the reasons I think that a lot of the tactile nature of board games is one of the reasons why a lot of people like the hobby, and this game and 5x5 City do capture that. I do think that the production is very cute. The box is very small. As you can see here, it's very thin, very small box. It does essentially need a rubber band to hold it closed once you've punched everything out and bagged everything up, which is always annoying, but it does hold steady with a rubber band. Everything certainly fits in the box. It just threatens to open itself. So as far as the strategy of the game, I think that it's, like I said, it's a family game. It's not overwhelming, and the interesting thing about it is that you do get varied strategies from player to player, even though you're all sharing the endgame cards and you are all sharing the in-game bonuses. Some players might focus on drafting tiles to complete their personal goal cards that they get at the start of the game, and an additional one each round, so trying to just get different animal types, whereas other players might try to get a lot of cubes so they could reuse the tiles that are on their board from round to round. And I think that I've seen the game play out in different ways with players who have taken both approaches win. So that is, I think, good, but I don't think that this is a game that's going to be playing from game to game radically differently. There are variants in the game in terms of scoring cards and in terms of bonuses that you get per game, but they don't seem to really shake things up dramatically. 5x5 City, just as a point of comparison, did have essentially a whole second set of scoring rules that you could use to play the game, and that felt more substantially changed from game to game. But I don't think either of these are games that you would generally want to play 50 times in a row. They're cute and they're enjoyable, and they're sort of best tried and maybe forgotten soon after, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're pleasant, but and it's a nice, like I said, it's a nice family weight game, but it's certainly nothing groundbreaking. It's simply a tile laying game where you're then going to be trying to optimize a path through your tiles. So it's very much what it appears to be, and although the game, like I said, is a small box game, it plays like a major big boxed board game, something that punches above its weight in terms of box size. So I guess generally speaking, I think that the game is fine. Like I said, I probably prefer its predecessor, so if you're only going to look for one of these, I would say 5x5 City is the way to go. But that's not at all really a knock against 5x5 Zoo, which is a pretty cute little game on its own, just nothing earth-shattering. So those are my thoughts on the game, and thanks for watching.